Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, today, two former Chancellors, Alistair Darling and Lord Lawson, got together to speak about the art of budget wrangling at the Cheltenham Literary Festival. At the end of a week which has seen the centre ground so carefully tended by New Labour, rolled onto by David Cameron's Tories, it was fair to say that the Tory Lord Lawson was in a much more chipper mood than Labour's Mr Darling. They were speaking to our policy editor, Chris Cook, about all of that, and as Allegra was just explaining the early beginnings of the EU referendum campaign.
To start off with, what advice would you give to a new incoming Chancellor if you had sort of 45 seconds in a lift with them? Lord Lawson.
I think the most important thing is to have a medium-term strategy. This is what we did with the medium-term financial strategy in the Thatcher years in the 1980s, and it is what George Osborne's tried to do with his so-called plan. You need to set out a path and stick to it. The idea that you just bump along and think of the budget as doing one thing one year, another thing another year, that's wrong. You've got to be consistent.
Well, I think the first thing is you're not an accountant or the finance officer. You're a politician. You've been elected because you want to make a difference, you want to change things, and Nigel's quite right, you must have a plan. What I would say though is you also have to be very aware of what events can do to you. You know, when I became Chancellor, everything on the face of it looked fine. 4 months later, we had Northern Rock and then the deepest financial banking crisis the world has ever seen.
If you had to write a critique of Labour's current economic positioning, how would you do that?
Well, frankly, at the moment, I would find it difficult. You know, I said before, I think I know what Jeremy Corbyn is against, but I don't yet know what he's for. And, you know, rather than get derailed about, you know, whether he's going to Privy Council meetings or not, he might be far better saying, this is what I think, and then let others, including me, you know, as a member of the Labour Party, judge it. But I don't know. And, you know, he's been there for a month now. Time is running out. First impressions in politics are crucially important. And as many people can testify, if you get the wrong first impression, you may struggle ever to shift it. So he needs to be very clear about what his economic policy is. And, you know, I'm waiting to see that. So I couldn't write a critique at the present time.
If you were advising an opposition politician, how would you advise them to critique George Osborne?
I think it is particularly difficult, given the state that they're in at the present time, for any critique they may have to have the remotest plausibility or respect. But on the whole, it's successful. We are in a much better place now than we were when the coalition government, and with George as Chancellor and David Cameron as Prime Minister, came into office in 2010.
What would you have done differently then?
Oh, look, I'm not going to go over particular things. I think, if you ask me one thing, I would not have had any protected programs in public expenditure. I would say all public expenditure, and that was how it operated in my day, and I think it is the most sensible way, all public expenditure has to be seen on its merits. And you don't say this program or that program is completely protected, so that when you have to make savings, they are all loaded disproportionately on those programs that are not protected. I would have not had any protected programs.
So you've just taken up this role as president of the Conservatives for Britain, the group within the Conservative Party that's going to be campaigning to leave the European Union at the referendum. What lessons do you think you've taken from the Scottish referendum?
And the Scottish National Party were able to say, well, there is no, it's a Scottish identity which is important to you, and that is what we, the SNP, stand for. I think that to keep the Union together, we have to recreate a clear sense of British identity. I don't think people anywhere, not just in the European Union, not except the sort of Euro the bureaucracy, if you can call it that, have a real sense of European identity. I'm not anti-European. Indeed, I live nowadays in France. I love France. But people in this country want a clear sense of British identity. They don't feel a sense of European identity. And given the fact that our membership of the European Union as a present constituted, maybe David Cameron can get fundamental reforms agreed. That would be great, but I don't expect it. I don't think it's like that, not for want of trying, but I don't think it's possible.
Well, look, I come at this from a different point of view from Nigel Lawson. However, what I would agree with is that on a thing like this referendum, you can't win it on cold economic facts alone. Because in many ways a lot of the economic facts are so divorced from people's lives that it doesn't strike a chord. There has to be an emotional argument about what the UK can do, what the UK is, what we all contribute to it. The one lesson though that worries me is that what is clear is there are now an awful lot of people who are completely disengaged from conventional politics, if you like. And for a lot of people, they'll say, well, does it matter which way I vote? And what is conspicuously lacking at the moment is leadership on the part of those who think it is in our best interest to stay in the European Union, to argue for change, reform, yes, but that's simply not there. And it is not fanciful to think that in 5 years' time, you could end up with a situation where we're out of Europe, we're calling into question again as to what the UK, who's in the UK, and that needn't happen. Let's learn from what worked in the Scottish referendum, but learn what could have been done better. As I speak as the leader of the campaign that won, but I know that in these referendums you've got to go for something more than just the raw economic facts.
That's quite a sort of concession, because your Better Together campaign was very cold-blooded, isn't it?
We argued both. Where naturally people's attention were on the issues like the currency, where it wasn't clear what was going to happen, the fact that we have now a very big deficit between what Scotland spends and what it comes in, but also the argument that that Scotland has contributed massively to the United Kingdom in terms of the enlightenment of in the past, in terms of what we are today, and we can achieve an awful lot more together.
In 5 years' time, can I ask both of you who you expect and would like to be leading your respective parties?
And we will have to decide when the time comes.
You don't have any thoughts at the moment?
No.
I haven't decided yet on that one.
Former Chancellors. Current policy editor, Chris Cook.
I've been getting away with it all my